Hello and welcome to Wednesday Interlude, in which I present The Lion of Justice, the third episode in the Norman and Plantagenet Series. In my introductory episode, I discussed the forebears of William the Conqueror and the establishment of Normandy. See the first episode in the info cards above. In the second episode, we looked at some background information. Now, in this third episode, we will look more closely at the four sons of William and Matilda. Once again, here is the timeline showing the order of their births. Robert was born in approximately 1053, a year or two after William and Matilda were married. As the eldest son, he was the heir to the dukedom of Normandy, and from a young age Robert was passionately desirous of assuming the title. By 1066, Robert was acknowledged as the heir of Normandy, and at the age of 16 he was appointed to the ruling council. But his dissatisfaction at not being allowed either money or power only served to create a rift between him and his father, and thus he became a tool in the hands of his father's enemies. From 1078 onwards, he became involved in a series of intrigues. Lord Robert even raised an army to take the dukedom by force from his own father, and William was actually wounded by Robert. In The Bastard King, Jean Plaidy writes that as William was on his deathbed in September 1087, he spoke the following words: "My son Robert has been a traitor to me, yet I promised him the dukedom of Normandy and shall not break my promise. He will not rule well. He is selfish, arrogant, and lacks the qualities of a ruler. Yet he is my firstborn, greatly loved of his mother, and I gave him my promise." Robert II, whose nickname was Robert Curthose due to his short stature, was Duke of Normandy from 1087 to 1106, and turned out to be a weak-willed and incompetent ruler whose poor record as an administrator of his domain was partly redeemed by his contribution to the First Crusade from 1096 to 1099. Although as the eldest son of William I the Conqueror, Robert was recognised in boyhood as his father's successor to the dukedom of Normandy, nevertheless he twice rebelled against his father in 1077-78 and again in 1082-83, and was in exile in Italy until he returned as duke on his father's death in 1087. He was totally unable to control his rebellious vassals or to establish a central authority in Normandy. He died in February 1134 in Cardiff in Wales. We will return to Robert later in the video to discover why he only reigned as Duke of Normandy until 1106, although he lived until 1134. Let us now turn to Richard, who was born in approximately 1055, and he was a typical Norman, tall and handsome, and when William conquered England, he was promised the throne of England as his father's successor. Like his father, Richard loved hunting, and it was while out hunting one day that he fell from his horse and was gored to death by a stag. Richard died in the year 1075 at the age of about 19 or 20. The third son, William, called Rufus, was born in approximately 1060 and was next in line after his brother Richard. So Plaidy writes in The Bastard King that William said, "To you, my son William, to you, Rufus, I leave the crown of England." In The Lion of Justice, Plaidy writes, "Rufus was different from his father by all accounts. William I had great dignity. He was a tall man and had always the appearance of the great ruler he was. Rufus was short of stature, broad and fat, there was a red tinge in his hair, and his complexion was ruddy. When Rufus was crowned as King of England on the 26th of September 1087, due to the death of his brother Richard, he laughed to think of those days when the Norman barons who owned estates in England had declared that they would not accept Rufus as the King of England, and prepared to set up Robert in his place. Their uncle Odo was Robert's general, but when Rufus defeated his uncle, Rufus and Robert made a pact. If death should overtake either of them without leaving a legitimate son, he would be succeeded by the other. Thus the survivor would have both England and Normandy. This was designed to disinherit their brother Henry. But in less than a year, Robert actually invaded England, but was defeated, and so Robert decided to go on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. The Pope had called for a crusade, and this was an idea that appealed wholeheartedly to Robert of Normandy. This adventurer, dreamer and idealist, who had recently been defeated by his own brother, saw in this venture an escape from the tiresome business of making terms with Rufus, who was actually wilier than he was. But Robert, who had lived extravagantly, was in need of money to finance his pilgrimage to the Holy Land, so he pawned the Duchy of Normandy to Rufus for 10,000 marks. The agreement stipulated that if Robert could not repay the loan, or if he failed to return, then Rufus, King of England, would be also the Duke of Normandy. When Robert returned from the Holy Land after a successful pilgrimage in which he was present at the taking of Jerusalem, he stopped off in Conversana, where he met Sybil, the daughter of the Count of Conversana. A marriage was agreed between them, and the Count, knowing that Robert was the influential Duke of Normandy, if he could regain his lands, and who might possibly become King of England one day, offered Robert 10,000 marks as a dowry if Robert was prepared to take his daughter Sybil. There had been a growing attraction between Robert and Sybil, and so the deal was sealed. Robert was now in a position to repay the loan to Rufus and to reclaim his dukedom. But William Rufus was killed by an arrow while out hunting in the New Forest on the 2nd of August in the year 1100, while Robert was on his way back to Normandy. Was it an accident, or was it coincidental that Henry was also out hunting in the New Forest on the 2nd of August? We will never know, but what we do know is that Henry took his opportunity. As a result of Robert's absence, his brother Henry, whom Robert and William had tried to disinherit by their mutual agreement, was able to seize the crown of England for himself. He immediately rode to Winchester, where he took control of the treasury, and then rode on to Westminster, where he was crowned King of England on the 5th of August. On the same day, to consolidate his hold on the crown, he issued his coronation Charter of Liberties, which renounced the oppressive practices of his brother and promising good government. Upon his return, Robert, urged by Ranulph Flambard, whom Rufus had made a Bishop of Durham, and several Anglo-Norman barons, claimed the English throne on the basis of the short-lived agreement of 1087, and in 1101 led an invasion to oust his brother Henry. He landed at Portsmouth with his army, but the lack of popular support among the English, Anselm, the Archbishop of Canterbury, was decidedly against him, and the Charter of Liberties issued at Henry's coronation was well liked, as well as Robert's own mishandling of the evasion tactics enabled Henry to resist the invasion. Robert was forced by diplomacy to renounce his claim to the English throne in the Treaty of Alton. For a pension of 3,000 marks a year, Robert agreed to withdraw his claim to the English throne, and at the same time Henry would renounce his claims on Normandy. In 1105, however, Robert's continual stirring of discord with his brother in England, as well as civil disorder in Normandy itself, prompted Henry to invade Normandy. In 1106, Henry defeated Robert's army decisively at the Battle of Tinchebrai and claimed Normandy as a possession of the English crown, a situation that endured for almost a century. Captured after the battle, Robert was imprisoned in Devizes Castle for 20 years before being moved to Cardiff. And in 1134, Robert died in Cardiff Castle in his early 80s, having been held in captivity for 28 years. Henry, as the fourth brother, was born in England in 1068, 2 years after William became king. Plaidy writes in the Lion of Justice that William said, "Ah, my son Henry, I have no land to leave you, for your elder brothers have it, but I will give you £5,000 in silver." "What shall I do with the money if I have no land?" asked Henry. "Come close to me, Henry," said William. "Be content and trust in the Lord. Wait, I tell you, Robert will have Normandy and William England, but in time you will have all my possessions, and you will be greater in power and wealth than either of your brothers." And as we have seen, his father's prophecy came true when William Rufus was killed in the New Forest, and Henry assumed the throne of England, and then ousted his brother Robert to claim the dukedom of Normandy. Jean Plaidy, in the Lion of Justice, discusses Henry's reign, in which he was able to maintain peace for over 30 years, and showed that he was a master of the art of government. Hence his title as the Lion of Justice. She discusses the death of his only legitimate son and the survival of his only legitimate child, Matilda, who was married to the Emperor Henry V of Germany. In episode 4 of this series, The Passionate Enemies, we will discuss the rivalry between Stephen, the grandson of William the Conqueror, and Matilda, the granddaughter of William the Conqueror.